Welcome back from the short commercial break. This is Financial Markets with me, Julius Nsubunga, and my colleague earlier on, Marcelino, as we bring you the best of trading dawn and also thereafter the best of what is happening in the world of finance and banking and the stock market in general, both local and also international. And now we're looking at how the Western Europe stock markets are basically performing. And as of close of Friday, we saw that the story was different as at the start of Friday in the morning. So we saw that basically you had many of these stocks in the Western Europe down. But now by close of day, it was indicating that probably many of them were beginning to bounce back. And now this is the interesting with the stock market changing all the time. So having a look at the Great Britain, it closed when the share price was basically up by 0.8% through the FTSE index. If you look at the IBEX 35 from Spain, it closed Friday also having up. It was up. It closed Friday with a gain of about 0.9%. A share on average, that's leading to an equivalent of about a gain of 72.8, bringing it to 8,142. So that is it with the IBEX. The IBEX 35 is from Spain and it's tracking down 35 best performing companies that are public, and also so it is important to know that it closed with a 0.9% gain. So the OMX S30 is from Sweden, and right here it is showing that it closed Friday on average. This index was showing that on average about an additional 1.56% in the value of a share. It closed with an additional 1.56% in the value of a share, and also that being an equivalent of a gain of 31.87 points, bringing it to 2,070.80 per share. That's from Sweden. So if you look at Switzerland as well, it is indicating here that by close of Friday, it also had a gain of 0.92% per share on average, and also thus being an equivalent of a gain of 104.59 points on a share. So that's bringing it to 11,495.69 in local currency in Switzerland. So when you also look at South America, many markets there were also basically showing that they were down, but we can see that some of them basically closed with a bit of a green here and there. For example, the Bovespa index from Brazil, it indicated that it closed with an average increase in the value of the share by about 0.41% upwards, and that is an equivalent of gaining about 470 points, bringing it to 114.360. So it is very important to understand that many of these indices are basically coded, so it takes time to really memorize them. The BSX is from Bermuda. Nothing much happened, but the share price remained at 2,462.14. Looking at Kyle, interestingly, is a very small island, and through the IGPA, its index, its main index over there, indicated that by close of Friday, a share on average, a share was up by 0.56% on average, and thus an equivalent of an additional 83.03 points. So when you look at Venezuela and also Ecuador, the stock market right there closed, having lost on Friday, and so the story probably could be different by close of today. Let's watch and see. Eastern Europe, when you go to Hungary, Hungary, it showed that by close of Friday, you had through the BUX index tracking down those companies. It showed that probably you had a share up by 2.09%, and that being equivalent to gaining about 877.22 points, and thus bringing it to 42,905.55. If you look at the Russia index, Russia RTS, nothing much has come from there, and so you should not be surprised because it was basically closed down, so to avoid losses. The Russian stock exchange was closed down, so to avoid losses. So you can see here that nothing has changed. However, on average, it was last reported that a share was at 936.94 local currency right there in Russia. So if you look at Middle Eastern Africa, you also have many of them here. You have the EGX30. The EGX30 is from Egypt, striking down 30 best public listed companies in Egypt. And probably it showed that by close of yesterday, a share was up. A share went up by 0.26%. Thus an equivalent of 27.08 points, bringing it to 10,480.67. That is Egypt. And so we must say that, well, we were on see today what's happening over there. Pakistan, we're looking at Africa stroke Middle East. Pakistan, 100 best performing public listed companies through the KSE 100 index. It showed over here that also by close of Friday, the share price was up by about 0.46%, and that was being indicated by a 229 points loss, bringing it to 43,653.33. Kenya, you can see this, Kenya through the NSE 20. The NSE 20 is basically tracking down 20 best performing public listed companies in Kenya. So you can see here that it closed basically Friday with about loss of 0.77% on the share, and thus being an equivalent of losing about 14.57 points. Now, if you look at Asia, the Pacific, as of this morning, you can see that Australia All Ordinaries through the All Ordinaries index is indicating here that the stock is basically up. Yes, the share price is up by 1.13%, and that is an equivalent of a gain of 82.9 points, bringing to 7,422.20 local currency a share. So that is Australia. Now, if you look at the Hang Seng from Hong Kong, yes, we're going to have a look at what is happening there as well, but it closed Friday with a share price down by, with the share price down by 1.61%. That's the Hang Seng from Hong Kong. The Kospi index, Republic of Korea also, it showed that by close of Friday, a share was down by 0.71% on average, and thus equivalent to a loss of about 19.04 points, bringing it to 2,661.28. Now, the Nikkei is one of my very most important, one of those companies I look forward to seeing all the time. And you have the Nikkei 225 from Japan, tracking down 225 best performing public listed companies. And it's showing right here that this morning, the share was up by about 0.58% on average, and thus a gain of 145.07 points, bringing it to 25,307.85. Sensex, also from India. Very important to note that Sensex is from India, and it recorded here that by close of Friday, its share price was up by 0.15%, thus being an equivalent of 85.91. So it was up by 0.15%, and that is an equivalent of about a gain of about 85.91. So Shanghai Composite also, it closed Friday with a gain of about 0.41% on average, and also that being an equivalent of about 13.65 points gain. That's basically a rough outlook on Asia and the Pacific. But if we may basically look at what MarketWatch says, and probably some of these live, through the live indices, through the live index, we can have a look at what MarketWatch is saying, because that is also very much important. Now, according to MarketWatch, so you can have a look here and see that just as of this morning, well, these are live figures and they are latest. You can get anywhere. Now, let's now have a look at the live ones. Yes, we have looked at probably how some of these markets closed Friday, and now let's now compare and see. So here, according to the Dow Jones, 30 best performing publicly listed companies being tracked by the Dow Jones, indicates that right now as we speak, a share is down by 0.69%, that being an equivalent of losing about 229.88 points as we speak right now. The S&P 500, tracking about 500 best publicly listed companies in the US, is basically indicating that a share is down by 1.30% on average, bringing it to about 55, thus being an equivalent of 55.21 points loss, bringing it to about 4,204.31. That's dollars per share. So when you look at the Nasdaq, it's also down by 0.18% on average, bringing it to about a contraction or probably a loss of about 286.15 as we speak right now. So the Nasdaq is tracking down those companies listed on the Nasdaq exchange. And that is what it is indicating right there. If you look at the global Dow, yes, we began to see that the global Dow is up. It's showing that all these companies being tracked through the global Dow by the Dow Jones that are basically global companies. Well, it's indicating here that, well, it is basically up. It is gaining by about 0.36%, 0.5 or 0.34%, just around that. And that is an equivalent of a gain of about 14 points as we speak right now. So that is it with the global Dow. If you may have a look at the gold, well, gold right now as we speak is basically now down. The price of gold is down by about 0.92% and thus by about 8.20 points, bringing it to about 1,966.40. Many of these commodities, for example, including gold, as the week was basically progressing last week, we saw it increase from 1,500 up to 1,900 and beyond. It even reached 2,000 at some point. And so right now it went down a bit, but now it's showing here that it is down by about 0.99%. So it's keeping on changing, but just around that figure. So it's down by about 19.7 points as we speak. 19 points, we must say. So the price is ranging around $1,965. Now, if you look at oil, well, oil also is basically also a bit down by 4.18%, and thus basically you can say down by about 4.5, 4.6 points, just around that range, because the figures are changing all the time. But nevertheless, it's down by about, now it is bringing it to a price of $104.78 per barrel as we speak right now. Remember that oil also, we've seen the previous 2 weeks, it's been very volatile. Its price has been changing quite a lot, and now it is now standing at $104.81, somewhere around that. And so it even increased up to about 130. And also because of the war, well, Russia had warned that probably it would go up to more than $400 per barrel. But now, when we see it there, probably we can say that probably even other markets may basically bounce back. If we may have a look at Europe right here, if we may have a look at Europe just right over here, yes, Europe, if you look at Europe, it's very interesting over there what's happening. Now, many markets there, through these indices, many of these markets are basically bouncing back as we speak, because partly because of the of the oil that is basically also a bit now becoming more stable in terms of its price. But now we see that the FTSE 100, remember it's the Financial Times Stock Exchange 100, one of those very most common indices used by investors all across the world and coming from the Great Britain, is showing here that you have right now on average the share price is up by 0.36%, and probably a gain of that being equivalent to a gain of about 25.75 points as we speak right now, bringing it to about 7,181.10 per share. Well, if you look at the DAX as well, it's kind of like changing as well, and we can see here that well, the share price is up by about 2.61, 2.60, just within that range, but it's about 2.6%, and of course also up by 352, about that, 352 points. That's the DAX from Germany, the index tracking down public listed companies in Germany. So the CAC 40, the CAC 40 is also a very important index, tracking down 40 best performing public listed companies in France. And you can see here that is indicating that a share is up by 1.43% on average of all those companies, 40 companies. And you can see here that it is indicating an 88.61 points gain, just around that figure. So it's about 88 points gain. You can see here also the IBEX 35 from Spain, 35 best performing companies that are publicly listed, also being tracked by the IBEX 35, indicating that a share is now basically up by 1.66%, and thus by about 135, 136 points upwards. That is for the IBEX right now as we speak. And probably if we may have a look at even just more, if we may have a look at Asia as well. If we may have a look at Asia, you can also just see that there's so much to also look at just right over there. Now let's have a look at Asia as well. So the Stoxx 600 is basically more like it's an index, and it's basically tracking down many of those companies operating in Europe. And you can see that, yes. Now, when you look at Asia, right now the Stoxx 600 also is a very important one, and it's basically up, just right now, up by about 5.41%. That's an interesting trend over there. Now, when you look at Asia, the Asia Dow, the Asia Dow is the Dow Jones index, but for Asia, and it is basically tracking down those companies in Asia. Well, you can see here that the Asia Dow is reporting a downward trend, and it is showing that a share is down by 0.93%, and thus about 31.48 points loss as we speak right now. The Nikkei 225, which is from Japan, tracking down 225 best performing public listed companies in Japan, is showing here that the share is up by 0.58% on average. And also it is indeed showing that probably there's an upward trend of about 145.0 points, 0.07 points added onto the recent share price, bringing it to 25,307.85. The Hang Seng is basically indicating here that it is down by 4.97. That's our biggest, is the biggest loser so far right now as we speak, down by 4.97%. And thus being an equivalent of losing about 1,022.13 points. That's quite interesting. Shanghai is also down by 2.60% on average, bringing it to a loss of about 86.21 points. If you look at the Sensex is up by about 1.63%. That's on average, and bringing it to that also being an equivalent of a gain of 898.44 points. That's the Sensex. So you have only two indices here indicating that probably you have an upward trend. That's the Nikkei in Japan, the stock market. On average, we can say is basically gaining, and the Sensex is also gaining in India, and the rest are basically losing as we speak right now. But the Singapore also is basically down by 0.54% as we speak right now, that being an equivalent of losing 17.63 points. That is it for the Asian market. Now, if we may look at the rates just right over here, I want to look at the bonds. I would like to look at the bonds just right over there as well. Yes, the bonds are basically showing that they're up, with example from the US, Germany, Italy, Spain, UK, Japan. It's showing here that the US 10-year bond is basically up by 0.0989 points, and thus bringing it to around $2. And then probably you have the German 10-year bond at up by 0.100, and thus bring it to about 0.351. So the Italy is also up by 0.086. Spain 10-year bond is up by 0.053 points, and the UK 10-year bond is also up by 0.097 points. The Japan 10-year bond is up by 0.0133 points. That is it for the rates. Now the futures are basically also very much important to look up for. The futures are also more like these are more like contracts between the buyer and the seller to sell a certain commodity or stock at a given price and at a given time, and thus blocking off all other forces that could impact or probably have a change, cause a change on the value of the stock or the commodity or the terms. So it is very important to note that these features are also very good to look out for. For example, the Dow Jones Industrial Average Future is showing here that, it's showing here that it's up by 1.01%, and that is an equivalent of a gain of 331 points. The S&P future is showing here that it's up by 0.93%, and thus also indicating a 38 points gain. The Nasdaq future is indicating here that you have it up by about 0.69, 0.68%, and thus a gain of 91.50 points as we speak right now. However, gold, silver, and crude oil are down, with gold down by about 0.99%. That is for gold. The commodities are a bit down as well, so you can see right here with the gold, silver, and crude oil. So the gold is basically down by 0.99% as a future. And you also have silver. It's also down by 1.80%, 1.74%, around there. And the crude oil is also down by 4.54%. And so you can see here the futures are all, the commodities are all down, and probably they're all losing, but you have the stock futures up. That is it that we had for you today, and I just want to wish you a very great week ahead, and stay with us as we give you the best of financial markets with me, Julius Nsubuga. See you tomorrow, same time.